Good morning. Hope everybody's having a great morning. A little gloomy out there today, but other than that, I think it's going to be a great day. Watching to see if my stream here is live or not. Hey, there I am. My stream here is live or not. All right. Well, great. Hey, there I am. As always, thank you for joining me this morning. It's always great to see people tuning in. Always subscribe. Always that helps out the channel and also gets you alerts when I am live. Please like this videos. It helps me get into better positions as people search and can get access to the video. And please share it as you find the content is something worthwhile or entertaining. Please share it with your friends and help me grow my channel. It only serves to get the message out. And as always, during the show, please call in 715-352-0801. Well, we'd love to hear from you. Love to chat. Love to talk about any topics that you might find interesting, contrary or in agreement. Doesn't matter. I mean, we want to provide a platform for people to voice their concerns, whether I agree with them or don't agree with them, and an opportunity to have some civil discourse on that topic. Had some great comments here yesterday. One comment was asking, why I include videos from other channels in my channel, and the answer to that is that this is really grassroots, and I'm just getting started. And hopefully, as time goes on, I will have better editing software that is live, and I can just pull little excerpts from different broadcasts to emphasize my point. Where right now I'm not able to do that. And in some cases, I just want to make sure that if people are watching my show, that we watch some of these things together, like we will again today. There are some important things that are being said that help to reinforce what I'm saying, which is in some cases the point. We're trying to present a story. And then at the end, I like to add my opinion to the story, and we're trying to provide different views from different sources, which is what a story does. I mean, if you read the newspaper or you watch different channels, in a lot of cases, they pull information from this area or that area and they bring it into their story. And a lot of times that's to help bring credibility to the topic. So it really depends on the topic. And right now there's a lot of conversation going on around the country as to how our civil liberties are going to be trampled on as they were after 9/11, and the dangers that occurred even more recently with the presidential election and people being spied on, and people abusing the powers they had, including the previous president, to take the government and move it in a direction to spy on an American citizen. Because what right, wrong, or indifferent, if you like Donald Trump, don't like Donald Trump, it's not a good idea that governments aren't held accountable if they're going to use those resources to spy on any candidate. I don't care who it is. Could have been any of the Republican nominees. Could have been any of the Democrat nominees. In this case, it's highlighted with our current president, President Trump. I mean, this can't go on. We can't have that happen. And we saw it then, and now we're seeing it again in the information that's coming out, and we're going to talk about that more today. As always, here in the beginning of the show, I like to ask everyone for their help as I'm running for Congress. If you can believe it, yep, I do want to get into the fray. I would love to represent Wisconsin District 7 as the representative for District 7 and for the people of Wisconsin. A lot of people have asked me during the campaign, why do you want to get involved? Well, people ask me about my show. They're like, why do you want to rile people up? Why do you want to be the person making noise? And the bottom line is somebody's got to do it. And if I'm not seeing a choice for myself, then I say to myself, well, self, what what should we do? Should we just continue to accept the status quo and complain about it for years and years? Or do we set an example that says, hey, we need to jump in here and be part of the process? Because, the really cool thing about the American country, the United States of America, sorry, is that we have the right to be part of the elections. And at any level, my campaign really isn't about money. Tom Tiffany's is about money. He's asking for money all the time, and he gets money. He's getting money from and through sources that are very political, and they drive a small group of people to donate in to campaigns, and he's generating a lot of money. But for my part and my opinion, he isn't representing the people of Wisconsin in a way that's consistent with the message he's sending. And the first message he has always been sending is he will protect our freedoms, and I think he's doing a very poor job of that. And you need to think about what kinds of things are being brought up, like social tracing, contact tracing, our civil liberties, socialism. And how the people that are saying they are our leaders and have been elected into office under the idea that they would represent us and keep us safe and keep our freedoms protected, if they're really doing it. So if a governor is saying that the only way we're going to open up the state is to enact social and contact tracing programs so that people are being monitored and they have to turn people in, if you can't figure that one out on your own, please call in. I'll help you out with that. But that's just not a good idea. And we're going to cover that a little bit more here in the broadcast today. So, as always, I'm just putting it out there. You need to think about why you're voting for someone and decide whether that's the right thing to do. And your vote carries power. I think people need to remember that just voting for someone to vote for them because somehow, we've got to make sure they win. Well, maybe we don't need to make sure they win. Maybe as Republicans, sometimes we need to send a message to our party that says, hey, if you're not going to carry the right message and you're not going to represent me in a way that I'm happy about, I'm not going to vote for you. And I know that happens already. It's happening now. I have no interest in voting for Tom. Even if I were to pull out of the election, I'm not going to vote for Tom. So, and that's why I'm saying we need to have choice in the process, because I think there are a lot of people that don't want to vote for Tom. During the special election primary, there were almost 40,000 people that didn't want to vote for Tom. There were at least 5,000 people that didn't want to vote for Tricia Zunker. So there are as many people out there that don't want to vote for either of those candidates as did vote for those candidates. And so that says a lot about the way the district is seeing the message they're being sent. And they're not happy. And that's what helped me to decide to get into the whole process, is because all the people I was talking to here in this part of the district are not interested in Tom, are not happy with Tom. And if anything, they're voting for Tom because he's the only choice. You just don't know. And that's why I really want to see people come online and call in and share their views. And I love this guy that you see on Facebook where he says some kind of message and then he says, convince me. So convince me. Isn't that part of the process? Call in, tell me why you love Tom so much or why you love Tricia Zunker so much, and convince me why I should vote for them because of what you think they've done. I don't care about what they're saying they're going to do. I'm looking at what they've done. And that's why I do this show, because I want to make sure people see what I'm doing and how I'm trying to influence people's decisions, because that's what you want to call it. But I at least want to influence them by giving you information for you to discern, for you to think about and understand how important your vote is and your involvement is. Because even beyond voting, getting involved. I have a cousin that he and I during hunting season talk a lot, and there's a lot of concerns that come up, and when that comes up, my first question a lot of times is, okay, so how have you gotten involved on that topic? Who have you called? Who have you reached out to? For me, protecting the people of Wisconsin while the governor is being a dictator, my primary concern is people's income and people's health insurance. And I have been advocating, even by contacting our legislators and contacting the media, saying, hey, this is important and it doesn't get covered. And you should be concerned about that. When they simply don't address it, they don't address it because they don't want you thinking it. And they don't want you thinking it because then you're going to call them and say, hey, why aren't you doing something about this? To be honest, we still don't have the $600 a week through unemployment. It's not going out. Hasn't gone out. I haven't checked yet this morning, but as of yesterday, I have not received any of the money the federal government allocated for unemployment during the first COVID crisis bill. So where's that? And how long does it take people to just get money out to the public? It isn't that difficult, people. There are teams of people who understand computers who can fix the process and get the money out there, because that's what's important. You've got people waiting for this money and it's not happening. You've got people waiting to hear what the legislature and the Senate of Wisconsin, for example, is going to do to help people keep their health insurance. And we're going to talk about a troublesome article that's out and the message they're trying to push, which would ultimately extend all of this indefinitely. Based on the way they're controlling the data, I don't see them trying to do anything different. The socialists and the Democrats are going to try to push this as far as they can and keep us home and keep us feeling like the president has done a terrible job, which is not true, and not vote for him in November. And they're going to use us to do it. And you need to think about that when you're deciding that, we need to stay at home. And when then Chris Cuomo is out running around with no mask on when he's telling everybody to stay home. So how many other people like Chris Cuomo and Governor Cuomo are doing the same thing? So you want to be able to stay informed. That's another reason I include these other articles in my show. Other broadcasts in my show, because I want to make sure people aren't thinking that, this guy is just a lunatic and nobody else thinks the way he does. So I'm hoping that helps you to, think about who else you might want to watch that broadcast. You've got a lot of different people like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, who all present varying thoughts on this subject all day long. And so, and there are probably a lot of more liberal talk shows that do the same thing. I don't watch them, so I'm not really attuned to them. And I'd love if you called in and shared them with me, because I'll include them in the show. I know Philip DeFranco is kind of in the middle. I don't find him to be heavily liberal, but he does present a view that's contrary to the president. He's a little bit after the president, but he, is probably more in favor of social tracking and contact tracing, and those are very serious issues. So on that note, I'm going to leave it at that, and again ask you to help me by going to my website at trailblazer19.com. and click on the nomination page, and there are 4 separate downloads, including my nomination papers, the map, instructions, and a sample for you to use to help fill out my nomination papers and then mail them in to me. And I need those mailed back to me by about May 20th, maybe 25th at the latest, so I can get them turned in by June 1st. And all that does is put me on the ballot. All that does is give people a choice. It helps me get me a voice, to let everybody in the district know what my concerns are and bring a broader message to the people of Wisconsin, which, how can that be bad? That should be a good thing. The fact that you disagree with my opinion doesn't mean I shouldn't be heard, any more than people who have ideas contrary to mine shouldn't be heard, which I don't believe at all. I think I would have said on my show before, I'd love an opportunity to get on with Philip DeFranco or Ben Shapiro and talk about these issues in more detail, and be able to debate them for people so that they can hear both sides simultaneously, and have the two of us ask each other questions, and go at what we believe and go at what they believe and figure it out. So I look forward to those opportunities in the coming months. As my show grows more popularity, it'll probably be easier for me to do that. Social tracing and contact tracing. So Philip DeFranco on his show talked about that, and so I want to share that with you here this morning.
Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you're having a fantastic Monday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up.
Hang on. Something's happening because it's starting at the beginning, yet it's not showing the beginning. We'll get there. Remember, grassroots. Sometimes my technology gets a little funky. Oh, well. Let's see if I get anywhere here. You know, that internet is going to have to do a much better job of figuring out how to get better internet to people. So hopefully that will happen. Let me try something else here. If I can get this to come up. Okay, well, here we go. He's going to say it again, or I'm going to get an ad. That's the fun thing about a live TV show. You get to experience all of this fun.
Getting stuck.
And the guy getting stuck on the slide, right? How many of us have seen that one? So here he comes. Hang on. We're going to get to...
Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you're having a fantastic Monday. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. Buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is war. And I don't mean war with another country. I don't mean the war against the invisible enemy that is the coronavirus, but possibly... So and according to Mr. Beast, over $1 million was raised during this event. And if you want to see the full versions of everything I just shared, the secret link of the day, really anything at all, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about coronavirus contact tracing. If you have not heard this phrase, you will be hearing it a lot more in the future. Right, so yesterday, the Australian government rolled out an app called COVID Safe. And this app uses Bluetooth technology to log every time a user comes within less than 5 feet of another user for more than 15 minutes. And very notably here, the app is not mandatory. If you want it, you can get it. And the Australian government has also said that the app will not collect location data. But the information people do provide to the app include people's names, phone number, postal code, and age rate. And according to the official government website for the app, this data will be encrypted and stored on each individual user's phone so that even the user cannot access it. With the website also saying that even if someone using the app does test positive for COVID-19, they still have to consent to having their data shared. And if they do, that information gets, quote, uploaded to a highly secure information storage system. The government also saying that only state and territory health authorities, as well as the app's administrator, will be able to access that information, and adding, it will be a criminal offense to use any app data in any other way. The COVID Safe app cannot be used to enforce quarantine or isolation restrictions or any other law. And as far as how long this data exists, the government says that the contact information stored in people's mobiles is deleted on a 21-day rolling cycle, and saying that if a user deletes the app, their information will be erased once the pandemic is over, along with everyone else's. And if they want it erased earlier, they have to send in a request form. Now, notably, all of that is just an outline in a direction given by the health minister and not something that is set in law. And while in fact the government isn't set to vote on formal legislation until May, the app is already incredibly popular. Just this morning, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Twitter that 2 million people have downloaded it. And while that is a ton, coming in at just under 10% of the population, the Australian government has also said that about 40% of the country needs to download the app for it to be effective. As far as why more people might download it, Morrison has said that the more people that download the app, the faster economic restrictions will be lifted. Notably, the app's rollout already comes as several states in Australia are slowly easing restrictions. This after the country reported a daily infection growth rate of less than 1%. But with all that said, Australia is also not the only country using a contact tracing app, especially as more and more begin to open up. In fact, according to reports, at least 29 countries are currently using mobile data for contact tracing, right? I mean, that app in Australia that rolled out is based on software used in Singapore's Trace Together app, which was one of the first Bluetooth tracing apps and has also been modeled by countries like India. And at the same time, other countries have used tracing techniques that are considered much more invasive, like South Korea and Israel, for example, which have used contact tracing methods methods that involve tracking people's locations through phone networks without their consent, which is in fact why we saw the news last night that the Israeli Supreme Court ruled that the government cannot keep using the state security service to track the cell phones of coronavirus patients after this month. This, unless the Israeli parliament passes legislation that says they can do so. And while Bluetooth tracing programs are generally considered much more privacy friendly, with any tracking mechanism that has government oversight, there are of course privacy and civil liberty concerns. You need a lot of people to opt in and use it, and very notably here, only about 1/5 of the people in Singapore have signed onto the app, and even less in India, with reports of about 75 million people out of the 1.3 billion having downloaded it. However, the numbers in Singapore are especially concerning for the effectiveness of the app method, because as one expert explained, the modest numbers in a tech-savvy country where trust in government is high shows the challenges facing public health authorities and technology experts around the world who are looking to exit lockdowns and believe contact tracing apps can play an important role in restarting economies. And that, of course, highlights another important part of this story: trust in government. Right, the app in Australia has had a fairly strong rollout because many people are happy with the government's coronavirus response. In fact, Morrison's approval rating is higher than that of any of the country's leaders in more than a decade. Then you look in places where government trust is low, like the United States, for example. It's unclear if an app like this would ever even be rolled out, and even if it was, would it be effective? Now that said, we have seen a number of states take it upon themselves to invest in tracing apps, and this with the CDC also announcing last Thursday that it's going to send $631 million to state and local health departments to increase their capacity to do tracing and testing. With the CDC website also saying detailed guidance for health departments and potential contact tracers is forthcoming. And so in the meantime, what we're seeing are tech companies also jumping in to fill the void. According to reports, Apple and Google are jointly developing a Bluetooth system that could be deployed nationally and allow owners of smartphones, including iPhones and Android devices, to know whether they have crossed paths with someone infected with the disease. But there is still not a coordinated federal effort, despite the fact that many experts say that this kind of technology is key for reopening the economy safely. And this includes the likes of Dr. Fauci, who said in an interview with Snapchat that a tracing app makes sense from a purely public health standpoint, but also adding that it does create sticky issues, and continuing. You could look at somebody's cell phone and say, you were next to these 25 people over the last 24 hours. Boy, I've got to tell you, the civil liberties type pushback on that would be considerable. And there's also concern that even with an app like this being technically voluntary, that employers might make it a condition that if you come back to work, you have to have this app. There's also the concern that this might not help all communities. This because according to the Pew Research Center, poor people, elderly people, Black Americans, and Hispanics are all disproportionately likely to not own a smartphone. But with all that said, that is where we are with the story right now. I would love to know your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts about the voluntary apps? Do you think that is the way to go? Or no, are you of the mind of drastic times, drastic measures, so we should do something like South Korea or Israel? Yes, no, why not? I'd love to know your thoughts.
I'm sure you've heard that coconut oil is a super healthy fat that can increase metabolism, curb appetite.
All right. So that was interesting information. Again, he makes a lot of comments related to the impact on civil liberties. The problem I have with that story is that he doesn't really take a position one way or the other. He's just presenting the information as, okay, this side's saying civil liberties, this side's saying you'd be able to see that you've been in contact with potentially people who have coronavirus. This side saying the only way we're opening up states is to have this kind of tracking, and having a governor or a president of a country saying that we're not going to open up the country unless this many or this percentage of people take part in the app. That's just a hugely socialist idea. It's a hugely invasive idea, and hell no. So, it's important to understand that I'm not the only one saying it. So on that note, then Laura Ingraham had a very good broadcast here that I want to share with you that talks about the other side of what Philip DeFranco is saying, or what he alludes to. I mean, a lot of his excerpts talk about civil liberties. Well, Laura talks about civil liberty violations here in her broadcast. So let's take a listen to that if I can get her to go here in a minute. Reset it. Sometimes you gotta reset it for some reason. I don't know why. And I'm gonna get the ad, right? So don't we all?
A well-functioning vehicle is essential. At Sherrill Tire and Service Centers, we are adapting our services to protect.
So I guess Fox News needs the extra dollars.
But
by
first, my thoughts at the
monetizing.
end of day 39, America in shutdown. Exactly 3 weeks ago, it seems like an eternity ago, but in the early stages of the lockdown, I gave this warning. We just all have to remember a crisis has to be dealt with. We want to protect people and save lives. And we have our civil liberties, our Constitution to also preserve. And after 9/11, we did a heck of a lot of stuff that in the moment felt really good. But then later on, years later, comes the waste, fraud, and abuse. We're seeing some of those things creep in during this COVID crisis as well. Well, in the weeks since, we've seen a lot of COVID-19 mission creep. Somehow flattening the curve ended up flattening our civil liberties as well. Virginia used the emergency as cover to ram through more anti-gun measures. Michigan and Kentucky, they cracked down on worshipers even when they were social distancing. And California, well, they're funneling money to illegal immigrants. But there's a new threat to our rights on the horizon, and it's being pushed by the second wealthiest man in the world. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, well, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on research projects around the world. They do a lot of good. And now it's the largest active funder of the World Health Organization as well, despite the WHO's recent COVID failures and coziness with China. Now, according to Gates, the only way to responsibly end the shutdowns and stay-at-home orders is for a pretty vast surveillance system to be put in place. Writing in the Washington Post, the United States can follow Germany's example, interview everyone who tests positive, and use a database to make sure someone follows up with all their contacts. Well, of course, he insists this will all be voluntary. You choose whether you download the digital tools onto your cell phone. He notes that some people have proposed allowing phones to detect other phones that are near them by using Bluetooth and emitting sounds that humans can't hear. And if someone tested positive, their phone would send a message to other phones, and their owners could, go get tested. Well, how this information would be stored, whether it would be stored, and to whom it would be accessible, I mean, it's anyone's guess. We don't know any of this yet. Well, in a perfect world, perhaps this would all work seamlessly, with no abuses and no misuse of our medical data. But there are profound questions involved here, including the damage that would be done to America if we really can't even open this up until an army, as they call it, of tracers and technology was put in place, if any of this even feasible. Now, one would think that given all the issues floating out there, that journalists would have at least a few questions, some curiosity about how any Gates-approved tracing and digital tracking system, whatever you want to call it, how it would all be implemented. Well, not so much curiosity.
If ramped up testing will be crucial for reopening our economy, so will something called contact tracing.
Contact tracing is the good old-fashioned detective work, long part of smart public health planning.
It's absolutely critical to stopping new infections.
Well, the Ingraham angle is asking some hard questions here. It all sounds fine on the surface. Remember after the 9/11, everything seemed fine. The Patriot Act, new Homeland Security Department, ramp up, surges. It all seemed perfectly reasonable. Years later, we found out some of that stuff wasn't. Well, sometimes we have to ask uncomfortable questions because we know that there aren't too many in the media who actually will. A few months ago, we were all terrified by models that told us millions of people could die of the coronavirus in the United States, or at least hundreds of thousands. Well, fear is a really powerful tool. And is it really true now, as some in the medical establishment are arguing, that it will be unsafe to work or to travel or go to church or a ball game unless we give up our personal data? Well, I haven't seen the scientific proof for any of that. That's a big leap. Well, finally, China boldly predicted today that it could have a COVID vaccine ready by early 2021. What a neat trick. China creates a global catastrophe and then swoops in for the vaccine rescue. I'm sure it will all be totally free, won't cost us anything, and completely safe. But remember, the pro-China elites in the press, they see China as an example to emulate, never really a threat to our freedom and security. After all, we don't even have vaccine factories.
We either got to start building them or look to countries that might make it for us. And one of those countries might include China. And if the president keeps calling it the Chinese virus and insulting the Chinese, he might have a really hard time getting Xi Jinping and his government to be friendly to the United States, or he may extract something from Donald Trump, in return that Donald Trump isn't going to want to pay him, like, an apology and some respect.
some respect to our Chinese overlords? Bill Gates, well, has some respect for China, maybe even in space.
China took the situation in Wuhan, and by extreme interventions in terms of reducing movement, they were able to crush that epidemic.
Now that China's mostly back at work, some of the critical supplies, having China participate in providing those could make a huge difference.
Hey, Bill, China locked people in their apartments, essentially. Scientists disappeared. People were terrorized and terrified. We don't even know what happened in Wuhan, but it's all like, oh, maybe a little extreme. They still haven't given us key data about the virus, how it started, who really was patient zero, the way it started, the origins, the full research on therapies, patient records. Well, they've made a huge difference, as he said. Yeah, they made a huge difference. We've lost 50,000 Americans and trillions in wealth. And those are my thoughts at the end of day 39, America in shutdown.
All right. So, as always, thank you for joining the show today. Please subscribe, like, share, as we've talked about in the beginning. Laura's broadcast and Philip's broadcast will be linked in the description down below in our link of the day. And so now we've kind of reached the point in the show where, in my opinion, hell no, hell yes. So this is where we have an opportunity during the show. If you want to chat, go ahead and type in comments, questions. But, you know, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it generally is a duck. And this idea that we can't talk about where the virus originated and then just, investigate how it was originated, that just leads to suppressing information, suppressing people's thoughts, suppressing investigative freedoms, and keeping the facts from people. I mean, the fact's the fact. I mean, this started in Wuhan. How did it start there? I mean, somebody brought up Fauci's sending money over to Wuhan, having additional research done on the COVID virus. I mean, I haven't heard anything more about that. It seems to have just simply gone away because maybe it's not politically correct or socially correct. And to be honest with you, I don't know why we care if we offend the Chinese people. Now, large businesses like Apple and Microsoft depend on China to produce their products. And they have benefited tremendously, and their wealth has been increased, and their companies have grown tremendously by capitalizing on the Chinese government and their oppression of the people, and the people working 24 hours a day for next to nothing to build their equipment, to build their products. And so they have a vested interest in China in that way. And it doesn't matter to them the fact that they're benefiting from the fact that this country oppresses people and keeps costs and labor costs down. And there's so many people looking for work. They get paid next to nothing in comparison to the cost of production here in the States. So what does that make them? I mean, if you're traveling to an oppressed part of the country and you're all excited because it only costs you $1 to eat, do you think for a minute why it only costs you $1? Do you think for a minute about that person who's working, trying to take care of their family and living in a cardboard box? And what are you talking about? Nobody lives in a cardboard box. Well, then you need to travel to Rocky Point, Mexico, and you can see people living in cardboard boxes. And that's an educated opinion. I've been to Rocky Point, Mexico. I've lived in the southwest part of the country. And I've traveled, and I've benefited, and I've looked, and I've traveled with my wife during our honeymoon to the Dominican Republic and benefited from the state of the economy because it was very cheap to be there, and people are working countless hours to just try to feed themselves. and we haven't gone back. Now, we'd love to go back, but at times I still have trouble with the idea that I'm going to be able to travel cheaply because somebody is making no money and not able to feed their families. I'll give you an example. When we were there for our honeymoon, they have charters. So they take people who are staying at the resort out on a charter, and they go out and they catch fish. And they catch fish a lot of times that, people don't want to eat. It's just for the sport of fishing. And there they keep the fish. So they bring these fish in that people in general would not want to eat. Maybe it's bony, maybe it doesn't taste good. And they give it to the people that work for them. And then what the people who are doing that don't see is that the people working the boat go to the parking lot and there are 10 people waiting, and they divvy up this amount of fish based on how much was caught amongst this group of people because it may be the only way they get to eat for the day. And yet the people doing it are staying at a resort that has a gigantic buffet and 5 restaurants, and they eat at their pleasure. And they eat at their pleasure because of the benefit they're receiving from people who are not able to earn enough money to buy food. And somehow that doesn't walk like a duck, talk like a duck, and isn't a duck. That's a hypocrite. So don't talk to me about not saying something about the Wuhan virus because somehow I'm going to offend the Chinese. I don't care. Chinese have been a threat to this country for years. They've capitalized on our willingness to allow companies to go over there and benefit from their oppression. And now they've unleashed a virus on the world that has had economic impact, personal impact, and killed people, and we somehow care whether or not the Chinese are offended. Hell no, I'm not concerned about the Chinese being offended. In fact, I want to know more. The world should be coming into China. They should be right there. If we're going to go invade Iran, and we're going to go invade Iraq, and we're going to go invade Kuwait, and we're going to go to all these countries and put Americans at risk for oil, why aren't we willing to do that in China when we're shutting the whole world down? Why not? People dying over in the Middle East every day right now. And nobody cares about whether it's politically correct. Nobody cares whether it's pissing off Syria. Nobody cares whether the Saudi Arabians like it or not. We're just there because we need to be there. Well, why aren't we in China? Why aren't we, moving in, setting up military bases in Wuhan and figuring it out? Well, part of that is because we need their production. We are going to see a huge backlash of the loss of goods and services coming into this country from China. And it's going to be bad at first, but to answer the ridiculous comment about having China produce these things that we need to fight the virus, what happened to Americans? I mean, Americans are out of work. We got empty warehouses all over the country. If we can build a hospital, we can surely put together temporary warehouses that can start production and put people to work and have them be able to take care of their families during this crisis. This is what we did during other wars. And if we're saying this is a war with the coronavirus, then we need to treat it as such. We got to stop sending everything we need out of the country. We have everybody right here ready and waiting. My neighbor just told me his wife lost her job of 37 years. Well, I'm sure she'd be happy to get another job. Maybe not 37 years. Maybe she's just saying the heck with it, retiring. But bottom line is, we can take care of ourselves. We don't need China to take care of us. It's only convenient for people who benefit from the economic advantage they gain by being in relationships with China to send more money from the government there to produce goods and services we need to help fill the gap with this crisis. So that's ridiculous. There are people here looking for work. 30 million people are out of work. We got plenty of people. We have plenty of capacity to handle this. And anything to the contrary is just ridiculous, and it's wrong. And we need to be calling the Wuhan virus the Wuhan virus. We need to be calling it the Wuhan flu, and because nobody knows where it's come from. Lots of speculation. It comes from a bat because that's convenient, so that you don't have to say anything about it being China. But we don't know that because there's all these different variations that have come out over the last few weeks, and we need to investigate all of those thoroughly, including Fauci. If Fauci directed money to China to continue research that he was told to stop, that's a problem. And if China took that money and researched the virus when everyone knew that by doing that we put people at risk, why did we continue it? And why are we surprised? And in most cases, when you do a virus like that, you are coinciding that research with something to combat the virus, so that should it get out of control, you're able to do something about it. If you're not putting those kinds of controls in place, well, then that's a problem too, and we probably should know about it because something needs to change. We invaded the Middle East because we thought there were chemical weapons. Well, I would have to think that a virus set rampant on the world is far more dangerous than chemical weapons. And whatever decisions we made to combat that, this should be 100-fold. And finding out who perpetuated it and then bringing them to justice and making sure it doesn't happen again, including if it's people in our government, then it needs to happen. So on that note, social tracing, contact tracing, hell no. Wuhan flu, hell yes. Going and finding out what happened, hell yes. Food for thought. If a question is uncomfortable or not politically correct, should it not be asked? On that note, have a wonderful day. Stay strong, stay informed, and I'll see you tomorrow.